Do you remember a little game called Temtem? Near the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, I suddenly saw this game showed across a bunch of websites I visit. With many disappointed by what Sword and Shield brought to the table, people were more anxious than ever to get some sort of Pokemon alternative. And Temtem seemed to be the perfect alternative. An MMO where double battles were the standard, character customization, the actual difficulty, and monsters followed you in the overworld? This is basically the dream game of any Pokemon fan. And when it first came out, people were hyped. But then, very quickly, people slowly stopped playing. We went from around 50,000 people playing at the beginning to, according to Steam charts, somewhere around 1,000 playing nowadays. So what happened here? And more importantly, is Temtem a good game now? Temtem is a creature-taming MMO designed by Crema. You design your own character, and then head out to explore the world of the airborne archipelago. Starting their journey around the same time as you is Max, who took the whole jerk rival thing a little bit kind of way too far. Along the way you encounter the dastardly clan Belsodo, who are the villains of the game. At the start there's something of a mix between Team Rocket and Team Skull, but it doesn't take long for their actions to seriously escalate. That's pretty much the plot of the game. Go from island to island while also stopping the Belsodos. Even somebody like me, who loves RPGs, couldn't care less about the story in an MMO. So what's the gameplay like? The main reason you're playing this is probably for the battles. Battles in Temtem are almost always 2-on-2. The only case where this isn't applied is during a wild battle, where sometimes you'll be fighting one opponent. You can hold up to 6 Temtem with you at a time, although in PvP you bring 8 and only end up using 5. There are 12 different types in Temtem, and it's possible for one Temtem to have 2 types. The techniques your Temtem will be using to fight each other are rather complex. There are a variety of things one has to consider before acting, beyond just type effectiveness. In general, one always has to keep an eye on their Temtem's stamina. Each move costs a certain amount of stamina, and you get a little bit back at the end of each turn. You can also choose to rest for a turn, doing nothing but recovering more stamina, and you can also overexert your Temtem, where you spend more stamina than you have. This causes the Temtem to take damage based off how much you went into the red, and it forces you to take a rest the next turn. Besides stamina, there's also holds, priority, and synergy one has to consider. Some moves have holds on them, which means that a certain amount of turns have to go by before the move is used. Next, there's priority. Each move has a priority value assigned to it, which modifies the speed stat of a Temtem. A slower Temtem may actually go first if it uses a high priority move and its speed is multiplied to be high enough. Finally, there's synergy. Some moves are modified when the other allied Temtem is of a certain type. Generally, this means upping the damage or reducing the stamina cost. But there are moves with more interesting changes. One example is Hallucination, which goes from being a non-damaging status move to a damaging attack if the other ally is a mental type. Maybe it's just because I'm unused to this system, but the game is actually rather challenging. Enemies really don't pull their punches, and even though each island is focused on 1 or 2 types, the enemy trainer can pull from any of the types. Even now, when I'm using mostly perfect Temtem who have been TV trained and are max leveled, fights aren't cakewalks. An aspect of the battle system I find particularly interesting is the lack of RNG. There are no critical hits, no chance-based effects, and dodging is a buff you have to apply. I'm pretty sure this is the only RPG I know without any RNG, which makes it fairly unique. You can't rely on a lucky crit to turn the tide to battle. You actually need to know what you're doing, and you have to force things to go your way. Outside of battle, you can explore the airborne archipelago. You can find items that help you explore, such as a surfboard that lets you cross over water, and the infamous crystal skates, which let you freely move around the normally slippery crystal terrain. There are also a few optional dungeons you can go through. Usually there are rare and powerful Temtem hidden in these dungeons, and some of them feature shrines that make level grinding much easier, so it's definitely worth it to take time to explore them. One place that's definitely worth exploring each week is the Sky Park. This is the Temtem equivalent of Pokemon's Safari Zone, except it's better in just about every way. In addition to the standard lineup, each week 2 Temtem are highlighted with a special bonus. With a higher encounter rate, the Focus Temtem either has increased Luma odds, where they appear with a different color and have 3 max SVs, or they have an overall higher SV floor with a chance of knowing egg moves. While battles themselves play out normally here, you'll have to use special sidecards if you want to catch something, which are pretty expensive, especially on Luma weeks. What's more, Every time you go to buy more cards, the price doubles. Ironically, I found this to be more of a hindrance on egg move weeks, since it can be hard to tell what egg moves the Temtem has, and it's almost impossible to suss out the SVs just from fighting. And hey, while I was working on this video, the Steampunku update came out. This added much more of pretty much everything. More new Temtems, many of which are from the underrepresented electric and digital types, a new island to explore, more techniques, gear, and animation, and most importantly, dens and raids were introduced. Raids are done with 3 to 5 players, where each player is tasked with going through a gauntlet of battles with rented Temtem. Each battle you win, you get some currency that's shared between the group that you can use in shops. You'll also unlock bonuses to make the fights easier. The goal of the group is to collect 18 gems to unlock the final door to the mythical Temtem. There you fight an extremely difficult battle against said mythical, where you have to deplete 5 health bars on a level 100 monster. If you win, you get an egg of said mythical. I won't say what the mythical is, but I will say this. Do try to get some toxic Temtem on the way to it, as that's the only element the boss is weak to. As I said before, Temtem sounds like the perfect Pokemon game. So why is it that the majority of people have stopped playing? Besides the rather slow rate of updates, there are also a number of flaws of the game that really hold it back from being the Pokemon killer it was hyped up to be. Breeding is somehow even more of a pain than it is in Pokemon. Like Pokemon, each Temtem has their own single values, which determine how strong a Temtem can ultimately become. It's nigh impossible to find a perfect Temtem in the wild, so you're going to have to breed if you want to get one. To breed, you'll need a male and a female with at least one matching type, and you'll get an egg of the female Temtem. Instead of SVs being randomly rolled, the stats of the child are directly based on the parent. There's a 40% chance the SVs will be directly inherited from the parent with a higher stat, a 20% chance it will be inherited from the weaker parent, and a 40% chance that the SVs will be averaged, and that will be inherited. If you have a parent with max SVs and a stat, you can force it to be inherited by giving them a special item to hold. Sounds good? Here's the lousy part: fertility. At best, a Temtem can only breed 8 times, and the more max SVs a wild Temtem starts with, the lower this number starts at. What's worse, the child Temtem inherits the lower fertility between the 2 parents. If you keep getting unlucky with the genders of your children, you might be forced into a dead end where you have to start breeding all the way from the beginning. Let me give you the average Temtem breeding experience. Step 1. You catch hundreds of the Temtem you want to breed. Step 2. Once you find the 8 good ones you want, you follow this breeding chart. Step 3. Around here, you'll run out of money. Step 4. You see these final 2? The ones that are supposed to be the parents of the perfect Temtem? Guess what? They're the same gender. Step 5. Start panic breeding and hoping to salvage something from this mess. Step 6. Everything is ruined. Alternatively, the good end, your finances are ruined, but at least you have a perfect Temtem. Remember, you'll need 8 if you want to battle competitively, so get going on your next one. Another big problem with Temtem, at least right now, is the lack of an endgame. Once you finish the campaign, you get put on a tight leash, with that leash being your funds. As I stated, it's very likely you'll run out of funds midway through breeding, because the items used to force SVs to transfer are both expensive and consumed upon use. You can only get so much money each week. The main way to get money is to catch and release Temtem, but there's a limit on how much you can do this each week. You can also get money by winning PvP battles, but it's a bit of an investment to even start doing these. While your SVs and levels will automatically be raised to the cap when playing against others, player-ran tournaments and dojo matches don't raise the SVs, so it doesn't make much sense to me to TV train an imperfect Temtem. There's also weekly quiche catching and daily mail delivery. Fishing is if you try to catch a specific quiche for a jackpot, but it's very hard to find the fish, about 1 in 800 chance. Daily mail delivery is what it sounds like, deliver mail to a certain NPC. Thanks to the community, this is pretty easy, but unfortunately the rewards aren't that great. You can sell off the rewards to make even more money, but it's an inevitability that you'll eventually run out of cash and ways to make cash. Once that happens, there's pretty much no reason to keep playing each week besides the daily mail. Just about everything you do will further put a strain on your wallet, and once it runs out entirely, there's very little you can do. If I was forced to be positive about this, I could say it made me better at the game. I ended up selling all my healing items to make chump change, which forced me to play the battle smarter. I think the devs said they specifically don't want people with perfect Temtem early in the game, which is why they did things like amp up the cost of breeding items. All this really did, however, was just benefit people who rushed to get perfect Temtem while punishing those who didn't. Raids have kinda fixed the problem of there not being an endgame, except it's still rather expensive to do one. Furthermore, despite the idea being that your skill and knowledge of the game will lead you to victory, in reality it mostly comes down to how lucky you are with getting Temtem. The first time around I tried to make a balanced team of offense and support, and I got completely thrashed by the final boss. The second time around I got lucky and had like 4 toxic Temtem and completely creamed the boss. Finally, and this might just be a problem with all MMOs, there seems to be quite a bit of grinding. You don't really need to grind if all you care about is the story, but for everything else you're probably going to have to at some point. I mentioned money grinding before, but experience also becomes something you'll need to grind for if you want to play competitively. At the time of writing this, the level cap was recently expanded to 70, but before that it was at level 58. Just about every Temtem learned some super valuable technique by hitting that level cap of 58. The best places to grind in this game have level 70 enemies. They give a ton of experience when taken down. They usually have attacks that hit both Temtem, and those attacks hit like a truck. After every few fights you'll have to retreat to heal. Usually these grinding spots are at the end of dungeons, so it's not just a matter of walking back there, you'll also have to trek through a dungeon. And don't forget the TV system makes it that you can't just jump into the high leveled areas and grind, unless you know you're fighting enemies that will give you the TVs you want. But even with all that in mind, I'm very glad I chose to give Temtem another go. While the money issue really weighs on my mind, everything I'm doing while I have money is pretty fun. Combat is interesting and the world is neat to explore. The game is still being updated too, so hopefully the things I complained about won't be issues forever. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below and consider subscribing to the channel. I'd like to start uploading more regularly, and I think I have an idea on how I can do that, so I hope you'll continue to watch the next one.